understand the complete fact of the statement that he is not here. The tomb is empty. And they fully understand the weight of the truth the angel's words contain. So what they heard and what they saw, it had now become reality. It was now fact. And then they remembered Christ's words from Matthew 16:21, where Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. He must suffer at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He is not here. He is risen. And so they remembered his words. They remembered that he was going to be raised from the dead. And that this was the third day. And he was no longer counted among the dead. He is no longer part of that place. It is, as Luke later writes in Acts 2:24, that God raised him from the dead, freeing him from the agony of death because it was impossible for death to keep its hold on him. It was impossible for death to keep him there. Death had to release its grip, and he lives. The grave could not hold him. He no longer is here. He is risen. He is alive. And because the grave could not hold him, this leads to the second part of our phrase, the last three words. He is risen. Christ is no longer in the tomb. Death could not keep him. He is risen. Whew. There's a lot of hope in those three words. Because it is within those words that changed everything. That these words were not given to mislead us in some way, shape, or form. As some have suggested, saying, well, maybe somebody moved his body. Or maybe Jesus was never really dead when he got placed into the tomb. Because there has been this continuing rumor that for the body of Christ was not stolen. There's this rumor that the body of Christ was going to be stolen by his disciples. Because the chief priest understood the instructions that Jesus had given them, saying that he would be rising again on the third day. And so they go to Pilate and they say, hey, Pilate, we want to keep the tomb guarded so they don't steal his body. Well, we already know what happens in Matthew 28, 1 through 10, don't we? That failed quite miserably. But yet, when the soldiers go back to report to the chief priest what they had seen and what had happened, the chief priests instruct the soldiers guarding the tomb to say that the body of Christ was stolen by the disciples. And so the tomb guards took the money in Matthew 28, 12 through 14. And then in verse 15 of Matthew 28 it says, they did as they were told, and they have begun circulating that story to this day. Even to this day, this story is still told that his disciples spirited the body away, and they hid it. The phrase, he is risen, also points to the fact that nor was his body removed and buried somewhere else. Just as Mary Magdalene tells the angel in John 20:13, she asks the one who she believes to be the gardener. She asks the one who she believes to be the gardener and asks him, if you would move the body of my Lord, tell me where he is so I may go and get him. In grief, this is the only thing that she could think of, that the body had to have been moved. But the words to the women by the angels, he is risen, removes all doubt that his body was stolen. You see, risen in Greek, recorded by Matthew, is about waking up or being aroused from the sleep of death to be recalled back to life. You see, Christ was not moved, his body was not taken, but Christ was aroused out of the sleep of death by God the Father. And Christ walked out of that grave. He was not carried. He walked. You see, it is through the power of God the Father that gave him life. This is not some concoction of man's thinking. This is God. And this is the significance and what we profess. For the message has always been that God was the one who made it all possible. God the Father is the one responsible for Jesus walking out of the grave. God is the one who's the reason why the tomb is empty today. And throughout the book of Acts, this is the message that is carried forth to the world, spoken to others when they inquire about who Jesus is. And we say that it was God who raised Christ from the dead. It was by God's power that he lives. Or as Paul tells the church in Corinth in his first letter, 1 Corinthians 6:14, that by his power God raised the Lord from the dead, and God will also raise us. You see, because he has risen, he lives. And the reason he lives is by the power of the Father. And because it was done by God, and God alone is responsible for this great hope that we hang on to. When we hear the words, he is risen, it fills us with joy. It fills us with hope. As Peter points out in 1 Peter 1:3, that all of this was possible because of God's mercy. That God has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So when we hear the phrase, he is risen, Christ is alive. Christ is victorious over death. And all who believe in him have hope because of these words. This is why Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1:13 to set our hope fully on the grace that to be given to us at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Well, guess what? The empty tomb is the revelation of the work Jesus Christ has fulfilled. You see, throughout his earthly ministry,